Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. Ready for another show? Doesn't matter. It's time anyway. Okay, I'm still collecting some interesting news evidence, and, all right, well, plenty of things happening here. Lots of input going on. Trying to screen things as we go on. This morning, a little crazy getting kids to the bus. So not as close an eye on the Twitter scene this morning, which is usually okay because Greg Dworkin is on his way in with a raft of stories. But today, not the case. We, of course, welcome Joan McCarter, but not until the last half of the show. So now we have to come up with something to talk about for the beginning of the show. There is plenty, luckily. And even if I haven't been watching closely what everyone's been talking about this morning on Twitter, I'm pretty sure we can figure some of the things out. Plus, we have plenty of material left over from, well, like the last year, or 10 years for that matter, that haven't made it onto the air. We'll see how we sort this stuff out. Let's see. Well, for now, we have the morning tweet, thankfully, from Bill. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. This is as good a place as any to figure out what's going on. Going for a Guinness Book record. Oh, good. Excellent. I love the challenge in the morning. Kagro X will do his 2-hour show in one giant run-on sentence. Oh, yeah. I could absolutely... Well, I guess I've ruined that. But I can make it feel like that. And that's the important part. Yeah, just this morning's post, getting ready for Joan and thinking about what she would be bringing us and all the complications that we'll have to discuss about what's going on Capitol Hill. As big as the achievement of the infrastructure bill was, of course, Build Back Better still looms. But in addition, all the things that we tend to forget about, but that Joan won't let us forget about, which includes things like, of course, another looming debt ceiling crisis, another looming government shutdown crisis. All things that can be solved simply if there are two parties interested in keeping the government running and working towards, the betterment of the lot of the American people. But, lacking that, I don't know. We'll do what we can to plod forward and find ways to do something, anyway, to establish a record heading into the 2022 elections. I don't know whether they remember that that's coming up. I think it's on their minds. All right. Oh, bad news. I was just checking my email, and other sources for good stories and tips. I found this bad story. Loudoun County, Virginia's COVID-19 transmission rate has just bumped back up again. I think we had made it down from very high to high. I don't know what the criteria are, but, there's a color coding and everything. We're not extreme. That's good news. But we had gone down to high, and everyone was sort of hoping that we would get down to the level below that, to moderate. And, all the things that, I don't know what prizes you get when you get down to moderate. But I don't know. Some people get to maybe possibly take their masks off in a restaurant or something like that. Big prizes that you can win. Anyway, I guess you shouldn't be doing that anyway. So fine. I don't know. Still looks pretty good in terms of vaccination rate. 64% all ages vaccinated here. They don't have a category for the 5 to 11s yet. Not enough data, I suppose. And our elderly, 65 and up, are 85% vaccinated. Not bad. 88% statewide. So, the rest of the state, not exactly smoking us on this, but, all right, well, we got some work to do. I wonder what, anyway, bad news. Don't come here to lick doorknobs anyhow. It's probably not wise for you, although we learned a while ago that wasn't really the chief method of transmission of the disease. All right, let's jump in to the various things that we can share with you. There's lots to deal with. Alex Jones, for instance. Yesterday, lousy day for him in court. Good day for the rest of the world. He lost another round of defamation suits by filed by the Sandy Hook parents. And when I say lost, I mean he didn't show up, to defend himself, and so therefore lost. So, interesting. in terms of if you were looking for him to come to court and plead his case and end up looking like an idiot and then lose, that we didn't get the pleasure of viewing. Instead, he just had nothing to say for himself. So if you're ever wondering, how will these guys ever defend this in court? The answer is they don't. And, this is a guy who's pretty much spent his life declaring himself in withdrawal from society, so I suppose it doesn't bother him a great deal. That all his assets will be attached, whatever they might be. So, he could really lose it all, but, he kind of lives almost on, sovereign citizen time, if you will. And who knows, what's stored in his basement that we may or may not be able to attach and liquidate and hand out to people. But here's the New York Times write-up of it. Alex Jones loses by default in remaining Sandy Hook defamation suits. A Connecticut judge's ruling against the InfoWars host combines with decisions in Texas to grant a clean sweep for the families of 10 shooting victims. I guess none of them were crisis actors or... But what other terminology do they use for this? I had something else in mind. But okay, that one I remember. Oh, yeah, right. False flag operations. Okay. I got to tell you, he's standing here in this picture speaking through a bullhorn to a crowd where? I don't remember. Doesn't say in the caption, but I think his, Weight Watchers guy might be a false flag operation, quite honestly. I don't know. He's a very large man. And okay, plenty of us are. I just find it interesting, particularly, with his espousal of, this street fighter, survivalist kind of, bravado that he puts on. And it's like, not sure how long you'd last out there. But okay, none of us are commandos these days. What can you do? Although, well, I hope not. Not that kind of commando. If you are going commando today, don't bother telling me about it. I don't know. Text Bill. He'll talk to you about it. I don't know. Whatever. I'm trying to push this responsibility. Text Armando. Maybe he wants to talk about it. I have no idea. Anyway, Elizabeth Williamson does want to or did want to talk about Alex Jones, or at least was assigned the job of doing so. She explains it this way. A state court in Connecticut granted a sweeping victory to the families of 8 people killed in a 2012 mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. You know all about it. Who had sued the far-right broadcaster and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones and his InfoWars media outlet for defamation. The judge ruled on Monday that because Mr. Jones had refused to turn over documents ordered by the courts, including financial records, he was liable by default. The decision, combined with previous rulings in Texas in late September, means Mr. Jones has lost all the defamation suits filed against him by families of 10 victims. Lawyers for Mr. Jones said he would appeal. On what basis, I'm really not sure, but, if it's a default judgment against you, I don't know. But I'm sure he's got some idea in mind. Or else, perhaps it's just the idea of saying, well, if I say I'm going to appeal, then I don't have to admit that I've finally lost. But you have, because your appeal doesn't go anywhere. I don't know. He may think he has grounds. We'll see if it gets explained at all in the article. Mr. Jones, for years, spread bogus theories at the shooting that killed 20 first graders. Remember, he's taking on the worst possible set of victims here, but that's what he's chosen to do with his life. And 20 first graders and 6 educators, he alleges, of course, was all a part of a government-led plot to confiscate Americans' firearms. Worst plot ever, by the way. Haven't seen anybody's firearms confiscated at all. And also that the victims' families were actors in the scheme. People who believed those false claims accosted the families on the street and at events, honoring their slain loved ones, abusing them online, contacted them at their homes, and threatened their lives. Which really, by the way, early warning, well, not that early, but it was an early warning sign. And I guess what I really wanted to say was that it's a very clear early warning sign of the MAGA sickness. That there was a critical mass of people out there who really would take all this stuff seriously, really would believe the big lie if you put it to them, really could be whipped up into a frenzy to threaten the lives of school board members and election board members, et cetera, et cetera. I think we all believed it was still a pretty small group when it was Alex Jones and InfoWars nuts alone. But of course, now there are multiple entry points into the same world, and they should all be, vaporized. Okay. Anyway, the parents of Noah Posner, the youngest Sandy Hook victim, whose parents were the first to sue Mr. Jones, have moved nearly 10 times since the shooting and live in hiding, which, by the way, every once in a while when you have one of the accidental shootings that I used to report on with more regularity, and a toddler would find dad's pistol somewhere inappropriate and shoot himself with it, and people in whether in the neighborhood or in the online community anyway, would say, hey, are they going to charge the parents with the negligence here or with something to make them pay for the fact that they were so careless here? And very frequently, it does happen increasingly. It happens very frequently. The lower your income is, the more likely it is that you're going to end up finding yourself charged with things like that. But in addition to that, they also tend not to levy charges against the well-to-do, often saying the family has suffered enough, right? So in an accidental shooting where it was actually your fault, you've suffered enough, so we don't need to do anything for you. In a situation where you're just the victim, people are making them move 10 times. Like, haven't they suffered enough? No, I guess not. Now they have to live in hiding on top of all this. It's the most disgusting thing you could possibly do, basically. There's really very few ways to top it. And, I'm glad for the verdict. I hope this can somehow put a stop to things. I hope that they come down on him like a ton of bricks and just literally strip him of all assets, and anything that happens to come into his hands in the future gets stripped away as well. And, I don't know. He just goes somewhere and dies destitute. Honestly, there you go. Kind of just hope that happens. And I don't think very many people would disagree. Anyway, listen to this. Here's some more horrible detail just to depress you further. I would love to go see my son's grave, and I don't get to do that. Noah's mother, Veronique, I don't know if she says Veronica or just says Veronique de la Rosa. I guess Veronique then. Well, this is what she had to say, of course. Just rejoin the article here. I'm trying to reword things on the fly to make it work with my asides, and it's not. So this is what she said in an interview after the cases were filed in 2018. Unbelievable tragedy. Can't even imagine. Each time the family moved, conspiracists published their new home address, quote, with the speed of light, she said. The Sandy Hook families maintained that Mr. Jones profited from spreading lies about their relatives' murders. Jones has disputed that, while for years failing to produce sufficient records to bolster his claim. Just forget it. Just take all his money at this point. Juries in Connecticut and Texas will next decide how much Mr. Jones should pay the families in damages, in addition to court costs. Those trials are scheduled for next year in both states. This is how long this stuff takes. Jeez, it's till the end of the year and all, but come on. You can't really just follow that up immediately. The Connecticut case was brought by the families of 8 Sandy Hook victims and an FBI agent who responded to the shooting and was falsely portrayed as a participant in the, quote, hoax. The lawsuits in Texas were filed by the parents of Noah Posner and Jesse Lewis. Right, so there's the answer. Why Texas? They had to run away to Texas to survive. Mr. Jones broadcasts conspiracy-themed content on the radio and online while selling diet supplements. That's what's happening. He's selling them all to everyone else. They're not working. Also survival gear and other merchandise. He began spreading false claims about the shooting shortly after it occurred on December 14th, 2012, including that it was a, quote, false flag staged by the Obama administration to justify taking away Americans' guns. An ally of former President Donald J. Trump, Mr. Jones also advances vaccine misinformation. He's killing everybody on his InfoWars shows, as well as lies about 2020 election fraud. Jones responded to the Connecticut ruling during his show on Monday. Why does he have it? Take the microphone while he's speaking. We need to defend all of our speech rights to say whatever it is we wish. That's the First Amendment. Nope, not quite. Although jury trials in Texas and Connecticut are set for next year, Jones has asserted that these individuals, again, are not allowing me to have a jury trial because they know the things they said I supposedly didn't happen, and they know they didn't have a case for damages. I don't know. Then show up. Chris Mattei, a lawyer for the families in Connecticut, responded that if Mr. Jones's conduct here were protected by the First Amendment, he would have had every opportunity to make that case, but he chose to be defaulted. It's not how I would have worded it, but okay. He deliberately chose to prevent us from collecting evidence that would prove how his business works and why he engaged in this extended campaign against the families and the relationship between that and his profitability. The rulings all came in response to Mr. Jones's repeated failure to produce documents ordered by the courts in the run-up to the trial, including financial records that would shed light on his business operation and analytics that could show how his claims about Sandy Hook affected traffic to his InfoWars website and online store. The Texas and Connecticut lawsuits were filed in mid-2018 and have been accompanied ever since by unusual maneuvering from Mr. Jones's legal team. In recent weeks, Jones's lawyers sought to depose former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, of course, in an apparent effort to bolster Jones's theories that Clinton played some role in the lawsuits. Barbara N. Bellis, the Connecticut Superior Court judge who ruled against Jones on Monday, criticized the effort to depose Mrs. Clinton because the motion was filed publicly and included details from a sealed deposition by a victim's relative. So, just sort of crossing the line everywhere he can. Earlier this month, Jones's lawyers filed a motion seeking Judge Bellis's recusal, citing a cloud of apparent bias and antagonism. Sure. Jones has been sanctioned before by Judge Bellis, including after he went on his show with his attorney, Norm Pattis, at his side. What kind of attorney would do this? I don't know. And offered $1 million for the head of Mr. Mattei, the Connecticut family's lawyers, on a pike. You know, the dead kind. In a decision in Texas last month, Travis County District Court Judge Maya Guerra Gamble ruled that Mr. Jones and his legal team exercised flagrant bad faith and callous disregard for the responsibilities of discovery under the rules. In more than 3 years of litigation, Jones and his lawyers had similarly failed to produce documents and take other actions ordered by the court. Jones said in a Texas deposition that Sandy Hook was 0.1% of what I cover, and that making his claims about the shooting had cost him audience share, but he failed to provide proof of that assertion. He fails to provide proof of anything, including everything on his show. But okay, we always knew we'd beat Jones, but even we couldn't predict that it would happen in such a ridiculous fashion, said Mark Bankston, who represents the Sandy Hook family suing Mr. Jones in Texas. I have never in my career seen such a dumb farce play out in a courtroom. Wow. In Texas, InfoWars accumulated more than $100,000 in sanctions from the court, including for ignoring orders to produce documents. Jones and his staff also failed to show up for scheduled depositions, lawyers for the family said. All right. I mean, it doesn't explain what he thinks his grounds for appeal are, but it might just be that there aren't any, or it might just be that he refused to talk about them. I don't know. I can't think of any, but whatever. I guess he's just going to, allege the bias of the judge, and the courts will say, nah, well, I mean, okay, what's your proof of that? And then he won't prove that, and then he'll lose that by default. So, I don't know. It's not looking good for him, which means it's looking great for everybody else, except that it takes too damn long to get the money out of his hands and ruin his life like we're supposed to. All right, let's see. Other items for discussion. Oh, this one we can save for when Joan comes around. I'll tell you what. Well, let's see. We'll use the time between now and the first break to cover this other story. I know you're all probably more anxious to get on to other things, like about how bad Trump is and why history will demand to know why we didn't hang him. We can get to that. But in the meantime, in between there and now, I want to thank Dave R., our frequent email tipster, for sending me this story. Sent it yesterday, and I don't think I guess it came in the evening, so I didn't get a chance to discuss it. And I had seen something about it flash by on the screen. Today, he says, hey, I sent this to you yesterday when it hadn't really been picked up, even though it had been in the news for a little while. Now it's starting to get some notice, though. So we might as well discuss it, and I'll tell you again that Dave R. was the first tipster for me, sending me this from space.com. You've likely heard by now, perhaps, about the Russian anti-satellite missile test. They blew up one of their own satellites in low Earth orbit, but yeah, I don't know. I saw it reported yesterday that this was a problem because it, of course, created a big field of debris now orbiting the Earth at high speed. And if you saw gravity or have any imagination whatsoever, you can figure out why it's a bad idea to have, a big chunks, big clouds of flying shrapnel orbiting the Earth anywhere. When, so many other very expensive items that we've sent up into space also need to orbit in that same space. No pun intended with the space, but you get the idea. It's very dangerous and irresponsible thing to do. But what I was going to say was I saw it being reported all day yesterday as, terribly irresponsible and golly gee, and can you believe how bad this is? And I don't know, I was waiting, I guess, for some reporting to say, the Russians, I think, at this point would love nothing more than to smash everybody's satellites. If there was any way for them to take out everybody else's satellites and not their own, I suppose they might think about doing something like that. But this way it looks like, oh gosh, we made a dumb mistake. And, we were just trying to blow up one of our own satellites. Like, what do you think happens to a satellite you blow up? It turns into space debris and space shrapnel. But it struck me kind of right away as the sort of thing that Russians would do and then say, I don't know. What's done is done. I'm sorry it happened, but it took out all of America's communications and spy satellites, and now they can't photograph us amassing troops on the Ukraine border or what we're doing what we're doing to back the Belarus government and their border clash with Poland and everybody else that they border, who I don't know. I don't know that I can identify all of them. Not that good with the map, but seems like kind of could be perfectly intentional. I don't know why we would assume it was an accident. Anyway, and I think that was part of Dave R.'s second message to me today. Let's see, he was just saying that he sent me the Russian satellite attack story when it had gone half a day without any mention in normal news sites. I know international Cold War-esque bad behavior isn't your forte. I like it, though. But good story. CNN is on the story this morning. Still an escalation in space, which was supposed to belong to everyone in peace. The world continues to deteriorate. Yeah, that's true. Well, we weren't going to get cooperation in peace internationally from a gangster state. But when we made that decision that space will belong to everyone in peace, they had like a legit government and everything. Not so now. Anyway, Russian anti-satellite test, a dangerous and irresponsible act that threatens astronauts, U.S. says, because it does. This again reported in space.com. Chelsea Gohd, G-O-H-D, has written this one. The test has so far generated over 1,500 pieces of trackable orbital debris, a State Department spokesperson. I mean, he is a spokesman, but the word they used is spokesperson, and we should just go with that. Russia conducted an anti-satellite test, or ASAT, as they call it, early on Monday, November 15th, generating hundreds of thousands of pieces of space debris and threatening the safety of astronauts in the International Space Station, the U.S. government has confirmed. Earlier today, the Russian Federation recklessly conducted a destructive satellite test of a direct ascent anti-satellite missile against one of its own satellites. U.S. Department of State spokesperson Ned Price said during a rally. Yeah, why not? We should have rallies for this thing. Do it like Trump and rally people against Russia. And we just invade. Let's go march. Ned Price said this not during a rally, but a daily press briefing today. But that was really yesterday, November 15th. The test has so far generated over 1,500 pieces, as we mentioned earlier. He added that this event has posed a serious threat to the 7 astronauts currently in space, and probably everybody else who ever goes there as well. This test will significantly increase the risk to astronauts and cosmonauts, if they care about their cosmonauts, on the International Space Station, as well as other human spaceflight activities, Price added. Earlier today, the 7 astronauts in the International Space Station took refuge within their Soyuz and Dragon vehicles. The Dragon. Docked to the space station as the station continued to pass through a debris field every 90 minutes. There are currently 4 NASA astronauts, 2 Russian cosmonauts, and 1 German astronaut, Partridge, Pear Tree, I know, from the European Space Agency on board. With the crew taking shelter, rumors swirled that Russia may have conducted an ASAT test that destroyed a defunct satellite not too far from the station. And the space debris from that interaction could be what's causing this danger. Do you think? I mean, it is trackable. You should be able to tell yes or no. Price stated that Russia did conduct an ASAT test that created hundreds of thousands of pieces of debris. Okay, we got that already. I don't know why we have to say it so much. There's Americans. There's Russians. Okay, right? I don't know. Well, anyway, long-term risks. Let's see. What's the deal here? U.S. Department of Defense was not made aware of this test ahead of time, so that was very rude. When asked whether Russia gave the department advance notice that the test was being launched, Kirby simply replied with a no. That's what I guess the reply would be, given that we just found out that they were not made aware ahead of time. Okay, I'm getting frustrated with this article. But it's almost time for us to take the break. Price added that this test threatens the long-term future of international collaboration in space, and it is something the U.S. will not tolerate. I don't know how you express the refusal to tolerate it, other than saying we won't tolerate it. But, I mean, that's why the Russians did it, because there really isn't very much that you can do about it. So, okay, well, what else are we going to do about it? Nothing. I guess we're angry, and I don't know, we'll see whether it affects international space travel or whether the real long-term effects have more to do with our using our own satellite capability. No word on that yet, but that's probably not something that the State Department would handle, and something that would probably remain classified.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. I don't know. Felt like doing it that way. Didn't really put my heart in it, as you can tell. But I'm distracted. For one thing, for those of you waiting the news, our senior military correspondent, Darwin Darko, reports he will not be going commando today. That's good news, I think. We all had a near miss on that one. But by the way, you don't have to tell us, but I guess we appreciate knowing. I know. I put it out there and made it possible. Okay, next up. Dave R. has sent me some more. I've only encouraged him by doing this, but this, I think, a valuable addition at this point to the discussion, and a short one. So there is that. The Russians and what they're doing in space. Is it bull, or are they serious? I don't know. And you'll never be able to tell because there's no real government in place. However, this is an interesting little bit here from MilitaryWatchMagazine.com. No idea about who that is and what they might be about, besides military watching, but whether they're doing so honestly, I couldn't tell you. I have no reason to believe they're not. Here's this. It's not quite current, but it's only from October 9th of this year. Russian space chief warns Elon Musk's Starlink satellite network could hijack cruise missiles. I don't know about that. I don't know whether it's true. It might just be a way for Russia to say we are peeved about Elon Musk's plans for the Starlink satellite network, and a lot of people are actually, but no one knows, exactly what to do about it here, or if anything needs to be done about it. It's just sort of one of those wacky things like, can one guy just own 10 billion satellites and cover the sky? Like when they were originally thinking of launching all of those things, weren't they talking about you could manipulate them and light them up in the nighttime sky for advertising purposes or something? I don't remember exactly why I think that's the case. Maybe I did read that, and I was like, that seems disturbing. I'm not certain what harm comes of it yet, but probably something. I mean, it's not supposed to be a light up billboard up there, and that could be awfully annoying. But what do you do? One guy with a gazillion dollars wants to do something like that. It's like science fiction movie. James Bond has to kill him in a volcano, apparently. Anyway, the Russians may or may not have a real claim about being worried here, but it might just be, well, we just want to blow some more stuff up, and we'll blow up a famous guy's stuff, a famous American guy's stuff, he's American now, and antagonize people and see if anybody have anything to say about it. So what's the alleged threat? The director of the Russian space agency, Roscosmos, everything's a Ros now, Roscosmos, the director, by the way, name of Dmitry Rogozin, no idea whether he's an oligarch or just a regular guy. He has warned that the Starlink space program being pursued by Elon Musk's SpaceX could pose a threat to Russian security. How so? I don't know. This was in the context of the U.S. government having provided SpaceX with $900 million for Starlink so far, with subsidies expected to reach approximately $20 billion under the next budget. But Elon Musk has $20 billion. Why are we giving him $20 billion to do it? I don't know. Rogozin, I guess, thinks he does. Rogozin highlighted regarding the program. There's no, good entry back into this. The question arises, why does the U.S. government need this? I don't know. Because this kind of spacecraft does not only distribute internet, but can become a tool for controlling cruise missiles, recalibrating their flight tasks mid-flight, controlling special forces, or an agent network. I suppose any communications satellite is capable of facilitating communications, which, if you happen to also have the technology and know how to hack cruise missiles in flight, and the communication systems of special forces of hostile countries, and I guess we're calling them a hostile country at this point. I guess you could do that, but couldn't any satellite? I don't know if there's anything special about Starlink that allows for this, or whether this is just, well, why is the U.S. government or the U.S. military paying for, or at least in part, for Starlink? They must have some military objective, and it's probably hacking our stuff, which wouldn't be a bad idea, but would certainly be a dangerous game. But so would making this up and leveling these charges without any serious basis for them, let's say. Anyway, let's continue on here. There's not much more to it. He further stressed regarding Starlink's potential to serve as a medium for Western propaganda broadcasts that the internet it delivered may have purely political and most likely anti-Russian content. That's generally not the problem with internet content. Too much of it is pro-Russian and for bad reasons. But okay, sure. Oh, and by the way, if there was advertising in space, we could write Russia sucks in the sky forever, and that would be annoying. I would agree. What else? This follows the introduction of legislation by Russian lawmakers late in 2020 prohibiting Starlink's operations in the country and thus ensuring that internet traffic in the country would be handled through Russia-based telecoms operators. The U.S. military renewed its focus on space warfare from the late 2010s and created a new branch, the Space Force. You know about them. In December of 2019. But remember, your pal Donald Trump did that. And also, remember, Donald Trump did that, so it's not going to work. So I guess you don't have anything to worry about. Among other possibilities, the potential for a space-based anti-missile system has repeatedly been raised, although I think they're outlawed by international treaty. But who knows whether anybody's going to be sticking by that, least of all Russia. Questions have previously been raised regarding how Musk's ventures support Washington's policy objectives, including regarding Tesla cars' possible use for spying in China and their ban from military bases, and the use of SpaceX technologies to support U.S. Air Force logistics and deliver personnel and supplies more rapidly. Russia has invested in substantial anti-satellite weapons to provide options against new Western assets, like the one they used yesterday, I guess, including the MiG-31 Foxhound jets with anti-satellite missiles and S-500 mobile missile systems. I guess I'm not so interested in what the platform is that they launched their anti-satellite missiles from. Just the fact that they have anti-satellite missiles is enough. Honestly, an air-launched anti-satellite missile, like, I don't know. Maybe it makes sense. I guess it makes sense to deploy them across all platforms, basically. I sound like a computer guy now instead. But that way, you know, the threat's distributed and you can't decapitate the threat in one strike. It makes sense to have them be launchable from anywhere. Okay. Well, that's an interesting accusation. I don't know whether there's any real collaboration between the military and SpaceX for this purpose or any other, but I imagine there's got to be some. Anytime you're talking about that many billions of dollars, it's probably the case that some of it is military in nature. And of course, space program lends itself to that. Interesting accusation about Tesla cars possibly being used for spying, and so therefore being banned from, I guess, Chinese military bases. Entirely possible. I mean, the electronics and computerization on board a Tesla is probably unlike that on any other vehicle. Although you could certainly put that stuff in any other vehicle and drive that onto a Chinese military base. But interesting thought. Something to contemplate in wargaming if you ever find yourself in a job at those, I don't know, Claremont Institution or whatever. We did find out the other day that they named themselves something weird like that. Is the Claremont Institution as opposed to the Institute? I don't know. Try to put them out of my mind. Okay. Speaking of out of my mind, or out of somebody's mind anyway, we have, let's see, more Trump badness. Let's begin, perhaps. We'll save the interesting round of Republican payback threats. That story wrapped up best, perhaps, in the Washington Post headline. In wake of Bannon indictment, Republicans warn of payback. I do want to get to that and discuss it, but maybe we'll do that closer to Joan's visit. Probably be something she might want to discuss too. And instead discuss this weird story that I don't think I am ready to believe entirely. But Rolling Stone, everybody's, I guess, reading the Jonathan Karl book. And I don't know whether they're coordinating between outlets about who gets what, you know, spectacular story on what day, but they're doing a great job at the PR department, wherever, for Jonathan Karl, making sure everybody's talking about the explosive and exclusive stories coming from out of his book. This one makes my brain explode, like trying to imagine people actually doing this. Mnuchin and Pompeo, it says in the Rolling Stone headline, discussed a plan to oust Trump from office on January 6th, according to this report. I mean, I really don't know at this point what advantage really, truly comes from telling anyone that you were going to oust Trump, but you didn't. Like, you know, please don't hang us kind of thing. But, I mean, it's so unnecessary, considering that we're just not hanging enough of them. and it's not enough to scare them into doing this kind of thing. So maybe they really did contemplate it. Although Pompeo, it doesn't make any sense to consider. Mnuchin, I can maybe sort of believe. He was always sort of his own independent, wealthy, evil guy in a volcano lair. But Pompeo, harder to imagine. But here it is. Subheader here says, in the hours after the riot, there were high-level conversations about, unquote, using the 25th Amendment to kick Trump out of office, according to ABC News' Jonathan Karl. Peter Wade did the reading here, waded into the book, and has rescued this from us. I wonder if it seems to be paywalled now. I don't think it was last night, but I wonder whether we might be able to find it. I don't know. We're going to find ourselves blocked even in the pocket version. Oh, well, they sent me a little bit of it, but I guess not. Okay. Well, that's too bad. But I did read a little bit about it yesterday, and now I have to sign up for Rolling Stone's newsletter, I guess. I didn't even realize that was the case in order to read the full story. That's too bad. I'm sure it's being reported on elsewhere by now. But suffice to say, the long and short of the story as I skimmed it yesterday was that these two thought about the possibility of triggering the 25th Amendment. Let's see if there's anything new about that in the news from other sources, and see if we can read you some organized thoughts on it. Let's see. The Hill has a story. Rolling Stone has its original. Yahoo News, I guess. Yeah. All right. Well, let's try that and see if anybody else has the reporting here. ABC News Chief Washington Carl. Oh, this is going to be a news clip too. Okay, or a video clip. So Yahoo News, no help to us there. All right, might be stuck with the Hill on this one. This time we'll read Michael Schnell's piece on it. Top aides to former President Trump mulled a plan to use the 25th Amendment to remove him from office after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, according to a new book. You'll never believe it. It's Jonathan Karl's book. And yes, he spoke with Mnuchin, and Mnuchin spoke with other cabinet members, including then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, about attempting to remove Trump from office through the 25th Amendment, according to excerpts published by MSNBC. Maybe I should have gone there. Karl, during an interview with MSNBC's Morning Joe early Monday, that's how this came out, okay, well coordinated, said Pompeo, quote, asked for a legal analysis of the 25th Amendment and how it would work. That's cute. I mean, anyway. But the idea was quickly jettisoned the next day once officials recognized how difficult the path for such an effort would be, namely as then Education Secretary Betsy DeVos and then Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao were resigning. And I read that last night and I thought, not certain that gets in the way of it, but I mean, I guess it's weird. Like, we need a legal analysis of the 25th Amendment. Well, why don't you effing read it and then just do the things that it says? What do you need an analysis for? Although I guess maybe you need an analysis to say, what if everybody on the in the cabinet resigns, or a lot of members of the cabinet resign, and then we just have a bunch of vacancies, and we can't get, how do we know when we've satisfied the requirement for enough signatures from the cabinet secretaries if the cabinet is in flux? That's a serious question. Well, anyway, they abandoned the effort, saying it would not be quick enough and it would be subject to legal challenges, Karl said on MSNBC. But in the hours after the riot, there were high-level conversations about this, he emphasized. Karl attributes the reporting to a source familiar with the conversations and told the MSNBC hosts that his story is rock solid. Everybody involved in it, of course, denies it, though. Anyway, he said that despite multiple attempts to get in touch with Pompeo or Mnuchin to confirm the story, he had not received any communications until he brought up the story to Trump. Aha! During their final interview for the book, Karl asked the former president why the two men would not deny the story if it wasn't true. I guess they are now denying it, but they hadn't yet. Carl told the MSNBC hosts that a few hours after that interview, he received the statement through Pompeo's spokesperson, Rolling Stone reports. Pompeo, through a spokesman this time because it's Trump, denied that there have ever been conversations around invoking the 25th Amendment, according to Rolling Stone. Reports surfaced in the aftermath of the January 6th attack on the Capitol that administration officials discussed the possibility of invoking the 25th, but it did not come to fruition, in case you didn't notice. Instead, the House impeached the president for a second time days after the rioting, and the president ran out his term from the White House. He was ultimately acquitted by the Senate. Carl's book is set to be released Tuesday. Hallelujah. Today. We finally stopped with the excerpts, pre-publication or pre-release excerpts. And now we get into I finally have it. And I bought it at the bookstore, and here's an excerpt. So still a couple days to go on this one. Anyway, seems hard to believe and useless. I mean, they contemplated doing something. Okay, thanks a lot. That was great. We really all appreciate it. Okay, let's get back to what else we got in pocket. Well, let's see. A few other things that we might want to share here. Something I didn't get to yesterday, and because I called Darwin's name earlier, might as well give him the military story that he's craving. Not really necessarily. Maybe he's been thinking about this one. Maybe you have. It's from the Army Times, which is not what he reads, but I'm sure there's something in Stars and Stripes too. And this one puzzles everyone. Oklahoma Guard, the Oklahoma Army National Guard, in the news. Why? They've gone rogue and have rejected COVID vaccine mandates after a sudden change of command. This according to reality, but also according, in this case, to Davis Winkie, who reports for the Army Times. Okay. The new commander of the Oklahoma National Guard has declared the organization will not enforce the Defense Department's COVID-19 vaccine mandate on its troops, according to local media outlets. Army Brigadier General Thomas Mancino was announced as the state's new adjutant general on Wednesday of last week, though he has not yet been confirmed by the state Senate, according to a press release from Governor Kevin Stitt's office. Of course, he's a big Trumpy kind of guy, looking to occupy that lane. On November 2nd, Stitt formally requested that DOD not enforce the mandate on the state's Army and Air National Guard members. In the letter, which his office posted online, he said that 10% of the state's troops had refused the vaccine and that the mandate was, quote, irresponsible. The Defense Department is aware of the Mancino memo and Stitt's letter and, quote, will respond to the governor appropriately, unquote, according to Pentagon spokesman John Kirby. In his statement, he did not elaborate, so we're left guessing. That said, Secretary Austin believes a vaccinated force is a more ready force, said Kirby. That is why he has ordered mandatory vaccines for the total force, and that includes our National Guard, who contribute significantly to national missions at home and abroad. The state's former top general, Army Major General Michael Thompson, told local reporters last Thursday that he learned who his replacement was via social media. He's very Trumpy, Stitt is. He was previously scheduled to transfer command to Mancino on January 15th, 2022, according to the Oklahoman. But I guess he had a good guess of who his successor was going to be. He just didn't know until social media announcement that it was going to happen sooner rather than later. Really. The day after taking the reins from Thompson, Mancino issued a policy memo declaring that the state would not enforce the mandate on its troops when they are under state control. The move is an apparent rejection of DOD's orders to discipline and ultimately discharge service members who reject the vaccine. Here, the local reporter tweeting the memo around from General Mancino. No Oklahoma Guardsman will be required to take the COVID-19 vaccine, Mancino said in the Thursday memo, which states that Stitt is the force's lawful commander-in-chief when not mobilized by the federal government. Although National Guard troops do belong to their governors when not mobilized by the Pentagon. Federal requirements often supersede any state uses of the Guard, as senior leaders often emphasize. That's because the vast majority of Guard funding, training, and equipment comes from the federal government. Yeah, so F you, basically. It's not clear yet whether the order will jeopardize that funding. That is one option. Title 32, the section of the U.S. Code that pertains to the National Guard, includes a section specifying that states that do not comply with Title 32 regulations forfeit their federal funding for the Guard. It's not clear, though, whether the vaccine mandate meets that legal threshold. In an email to Army Times, STIT's top spokesperson, Charlie Hannema, not Enema, Hannema, I think. I don't know how to pronounce it. Hannema. I'm just saying it sounds like that, and he should get together with the Dushin guy that we heard about the other day. Just, I don't know. What can you do? People are introducing liquids all over the place. Anyway, STIT's top spokesperson, Charlie Hannema, argued that the only way Oklahoma would forfeit any federal funding for failing to comply with Title 32 would be to ignore the lawful order of the duly elected civilian authority, i.e., the governor of Oklahoma. Duly. I mean, this is a quote. So it was in an email. So there you have it. The top spokesperson for the governor of Oklahoma, who likes to also style himself commander-in-chief of the Oklahoma National Guard, is that they will have to obey the orders of the duly elected, D-U-A-L-L-Y, not D-U-E-L-Y, duly, or rather D-U-L-Y, no E in duly, elected civilian authority. So, okay, but there is an interesting point that he's trying to make, and then screwing it up by spelling duly incorrectly, which is that he says the only way that Oklahoma would lose out on federal funding for failing to comply with Title 32 would be to ignore the lawful order of the elected civilian authority, and it's the governor of Oklahoma. I mean, I think it's pretty simple to actually get past that, right? Federalize the troops, call them up, and order them vaccinated, and while they're under federal control, you can dismiss the personnel who refuse to comply with the order. Once nationalized, the duly elected civilian authority is the president of the United States, not the governor of Oklahoma. But he's so in control that he's been elected duly. There's at least 2 electorates are electing this guy. I don't know. Anyway, he's contradicted here. Air Force Major Matthew Murphy, a National Guard Bureau spokesperson, told Stars and Stripes, that's where Darwin will have read about it, that the issue of the vaccine mandate was a legal gray area that would have to be reviewed by our lawyers. This is where the difference between Title 32 and Title 10 becomes a real issue. Although, again, some typos here. It does read, and this is where the difference between Title 32 and Title 10 becomes an issue. Murphy told Stars and Stripes. We cleaned it up. In most instances, the guardsmen are in their Title 32 capacity, which means they're on state duty. In order to be federalized, they have to be on Title 10. In a statement to the Oklahoman, the state's top spokesperson, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Legler, I imagine maybe the state's top National Guard spokesperson, explained that the memo does not provide any protection should they need to attend any military school or training activity run by an active duty component or the Department of Defense. Right, so if you're going to military school or training and you find yourself in a federal installation and under federal command, poof, it's time to get the vaccine. When Army Times reached out to the Oklahoma Guard, an official indicated that they were not authorized to make any statement or share the memorandum, but Fox News had it, or the local Fox channel, not Fox News, but like Fox 25, the local affiliate. That was whose tweet was embedded above from the local reporter. Anyway, National Guard Bureau and DoD spokespeople were unable to immediately offer comment either. It is not clear whether Thompson was fired because he refused to rescind a policy memo requiring troops to get the COVID-19 vaccine. He referred questions on the matter to Stitt's office. Hanema did not address why Thompson's departure was abruptly accelerated. A previous vaccine policy memo from Thompson, which Mancino's order rescinded, had indicated that there would be, quote, consequences for uniformed members and Title V federal civilian employees who declined the shot, according to the Oklahoman. The policy was in line with DoD guidance on the issue. So there you go. It's a little bit confusing, but it'll be an interesting test, and it's also just a good reminder of, these weirdo governors who think they're mini commanders-in-chief and that this qualifies them for the presidency. That's going to be their claim to military credentials when they finally run for president. Okay, bumping up now against the top of the hour break, so not much time to squeeze anything else in. Let's see, are there other items that I wanted to share with you? Oh, no, okay, we have that. Yeah, I was just looking back at the Claremont Institute, and here, I still have the Bulwark piece from yesterday in pocket, and they refer to them as the Claremont Institute, which I always thought was their name up until like last week when I read the thing that said it was referring to them as the Claremont Institution, which sounds awfully weird and wrong. So, all right, well, I probably won't bother clearing that one up ever. Hopefully we never hear from them again. All right, let's see. Of course, also looming large in online conversation about the former guy. Lots of circulation of one of the other hot memos to recently resurface, but evidence of stuff that we kind of saw in real time. Perhaps we can share and discuss some of the memos about the Trump administration's interference, and perhaps the interference of the former guy himself, in the CDC's handling of the COVID pandemic. I mean, it's always nice to get a paper trail and to be able to say definitively that there's proof that they were interfering with the scientists and the people who were supposed to save our lives, and that's the reason we have the worst COVID outbreak in the world and might never get rid of it. But whatever evidence we can take, we'll get it. We all wonder why we didn't hang that guy. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And my water has toppled over, but nothing too major. We do keep it at a fair distance from all the computers for that reason. But water is splashy, and so it's not fun. So no major damage, I don't think. But, if I had my druthers, I would get up and do some more mopping up. But I think it's pretty much under control. No production staff in-house today. It's an office day for them. So they're off in our Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters. We don't actually have an office, and they don't actually work for us, so it's fine. Anyway, all right. So where were we? Oh, yes, right. Talking about the reporting of new emails detailing, well, let's see, the Politico version of the story. Emails reveal new details of Trump White House interference in CDC COVID planning. The piece here, let's open up the original so we can get the byline right. Aaron Banco reporting what, at bottom is a, no crap story. Of course he interfered in it. He's an idiot. And honestly, he should have been torn to pieces on the White House lawn just for that. But also, let's throw in there the fact that he sold out the Ukraine and left them to the wolves because he thought he could make some political hay out of blackmailing them, and that didn't work. And anyway, that plus, the coup and any number of other things for which he should have found himself destroyed politically. But we were unable to achieve that, and it's too bad. Anyway, this new proof of how horrible he was is reported this way. New emails and documents released by a congressional committee, you know which one, investigating the Trump administration's handling of the pandemic. Oh, that would be a different one, in fact. I had forgotten about this one. Good. Okay, well, some more congressional procedure news. Well, anyway, this congressional committee that happens to be doing this investigation says that these documents now show the extent to which top White House officials interfered in the CDC's efforts to warn Americans about COVID-19 because it would look bad for Trump, right? This is, in fact, the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis. Did you even know they were operating? I think we must have, but I forgot. Well, they have conducted interviews over the last several months about how former President Donald Trump and his closest confidants, including former White House advisor Scott Atlas and son-in-law Jared Kushner, tried to steer the course of the federal response, sidestepping the interagency process. On Friday, the committee released emails and transcripts with former senior CDC officials about the White House's attempts to sideline the agency at critical moments at the beginning of the U.S. outbreak. The emails and transcripts detail how, in the early days of 2020, Trump and his allies in the White House blocked media briefings and interviews with CDC officials, attempted to alter public safety guidance normally cleared by the agency, and instructed agency officials to destroy evidence that might be construed as political interference. So not only did they try to prevent them from actually helping us control the disease, they also ordered them to destroy the evidence that they were interfering with our efforts to control the disease. The documents further underscore how Trump appointees tried to undermine the work of scientists and career staff at CDC to control the administration's messaging on the spread of the virus and the dangers of transmission and infection. And again, it's great to have the proof if you're going to do something with it. But I mean, if you saw any of the briefings, you would know what happened. And obviously the administration interfered in a way that, I don't know, let's say led to the deaths of, at the moment, 785,000 Americans. And that's an undercount. I mean, you remember, the world is panicking about this and locking down. And in countries that actually did clamp down, they have near zero COVID rates, though you can't keep it out entirely. But there's plenty of countries where they controlled the spread better than we did. Well, in fact, all countries controlled the spread better than we did, for the most part. Anyway, at least initially. And you'll recall the president getting on the television saying, we have no cases, there's 15 and soon it'll be zero. By the way, as of yesterday, according to Worldometers, not zero, 48 million. That's the actual number that we're dealing with, according to, again, probably an undercount and according to Worldometers, but not 15 and not zero. Anyway, you know the rest of the story from the history of how things unfolded. Several former top officials, including Deborah Birx, former White House COVID-19 Task Force Coordinator, have answered committee questions. Former National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases Director Nancy Messonnier, I forget how Greg pronounces her name, but it looks like it, right? Messonnier. And former CDC Principal Deputy Director Anne Schuchat, Schuchat. I don't think we ever, maybe mentioned her name, but I forget. Also appeared for questioning. Both stepped down from their posts at CDC in the spring. The documents released by the committee and the corresponding interviews with witnesses lay out a timeline for how the Trump White House began to downplay the dangers posed by COVID-19. Several former high-level Trump officials who worked in the administration's response have said publicly, after the fact, that they did not want to panic the American public or let them survive. But scientists at the CDC, well aware that the virus was transmitting at high rates and could infect easily, stepped in early to speak to the American people directly in an attempt to warn the public about what was coming. In a press conference on February 2020, Messonnier told the reporters that she expected community spread within the U.S. and that the disruptions to everyday life could be severe. Oh, she was right. Oh, shut up, lady. Go away. It was one of the first blunt assessments from a high-level CDC official about what was in store for the U.S. The warning frustrated Trump. I don't like it because it's true. Gotta stop it. Give me more orange paint. I'm going to a Denver Broncos game. That warning frustrated Trump, according to documents released by the Congressional Committee Friday. I believed that my remarks were accurate based on the information we had at the time. They were. That's what she told the committee in her interview. I heard that the president was unhappy with the telebriefing, probably because it was true. Following Messonniers' comments, am I pronouncing that right? In the February 25th briefing, the leadership at the Department of Health and Human Services called yet another press conference. The impression that I was given was that the reaction to the morning briefing was quite volatile. And having another briefing, later, I think, I got the impression that having another briefing might get, there was nothing new to report, but get additional voices out there talking about that situation. Shutchot, whatever her name is, told the committee in her testimony. From that point, the White House took the lead on the federal response and controlling all communications, which is totally wrong, and messaging about the virus, denying CDC requests to hold its own briefings. We would submit a request to the others to do a briefing, and it was declined. And then, we didn't get the approval to be able to do one, Shukot said, referring to specific requests she received from the media for an interview. Shukot said the White House also denied several agency telebriefings in the spring of 2020 that would have allowed CDC scientists to explain emerging evidence about how the virus moved and infected different populations. You might want to know that. As CDC scientists continue to try and push out their field reporting on COVID-19, White House officials attempted to morph messaging and at times downplay the significance of the spread of the virus. Politico, they're going to pat themselves on the back now, was the first to report in 2020 that communications officials at the Department of Health and Human Services sought to seek changes in the CDC's weekly COVID-19 reports to align the summaries more closely with the president's talking points. Christine Casey, one of the leaders of the CDC team that publishes weekly scientific reports, also known as the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Reports, told the House committee that at one point in August of 2020 she received instructions to delete an email reflecting political interference. Casey said Paul Alexander, the former temporary senior policy advisor to the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at HHS, instructed her to stop publishing the weekly reports, insinuating her team was trying to make Trump look bad in public. We remember how this was a tremendous blow to American medical leadership and prestige around the world to just simply stop publishing or even tinker with the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Reports. So it made Trump look bad in the end anyway. After conversations with leadership at CDC, including then Director Robert Redfield, Michael Iadamarco, I'm guessing at that pronunciation, one of the CDC's leaders overseeing epidemiology and laboratory services, told Casey to delete the email. I should make sure we know who that is. Michael Iadamarco, Iadamarco. I believe he said that the director, Redfield, had said to delete the email and that anyone else who had received it, should do so as well, Casey said in her testimony. Shukot told the committee that the interference in the CDC's scientific process went even further and affected the agency's public health guidance from the beginning of the pandemic. In one instance, she said there was a directive in March 2020 to the White House to suspend the introduction of certain persons from countries where communicable disease exists. Martin Cetron, the director for the Division of Global Migration and Quarantine at the CDC, refused to sign the order. His view was that the facts on the ground didn't call for this from a public health reason, and that the decision wasn't being made based on criteria for quarantine. It may have been initiated for other purposes, Shukot said. I don't think he was comfortable using his authority to do that because it didn't meet his careful review of what the criteria are. Redfield eventually signed the order, despite Cetron's opposition. On several instances, Shukot and Alexander tried to change the wording of the MMWR, adding that it took active effort from career CDC staff to preserve the integrity of the scientific reports. There's a long-standing practice that the MMWRs are scientific products of CDC and that there's a firewall between the editorial production and political levels, Shukot said. The CDC appeared to take steps to insulate the agency from input from other administration offices regarding its work. In April of 2020, an email released by the committee on Friday, in an April email released on Friday, then Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vogt emailed Redfield raising questions about why CDC was not planning to send public health guidance on meatpacking plants through the White House. At the time, the White House was at odds with CDC about what steps meatpacking plants should take to protect workers from contracting COVID-19. The virus had infected several plants in the Midwest, causing disruptions to workflow. Bob, your team, Kyle McGowan, in parentheses, is saying that they are not going to send the meatpacking guidance through the normal OIRA channel in order to serve task force. We need to make sure it comes in as normal to run our clearance process, Vogt wrote. At the urging of top White House officials, including Mark Short, former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence, Redfield softened the language of the guidance. In another similar scenario, CDC scientists pushed back on the comments received on guidance for faith groups, institutions which were seeing rising case numbers because of their large indoor gatherings. Jenny Lichter, then deputy director of the White House Domestic Policy Council, wrote that it was unacceptable that CDC had accepted virtually none of the comments or edits submitted by me, DOJ, or anyone else on this very sensitive section, according to documents released by the committee on Friday. In response, Joe Grogan, not Joe Rogan, Joe Grogan, the former director of the U.S. Domestic Policy Council and assistant to Trump, wrote, "I am not sure these should go back to CDC. I think we should make the edits and then a small group of principals finalize." Later that summer, in August, the CDC was in the process of renewing its testing guidance in anticipation of the new school year. Cases were surging across the country, particularly in the Southwest and West. CDC scientists were in agreement that the country needed to maintain strict testing guidelines to quickly detect community transmission to fend off future surges. Birx, then the White House COVID-19 Task Force coordinator, told the House committee in her testimony that Atlas, a radiologist and White House advisor who frequently disagreed with the CDC, attempted to alter the agency's testing guidance. He pressed the agency to rewrite its guidelines to underscore that only symptomatic individuals needed to get tested. His argument at the time was that the U.S. only needed to worry about those individuals who had COVID-19 and were experiencing symptoms such as fever and coughing, because those were the people who could more easily spread the virus. But scientists throughout the administration, argued that asymptomatic individuals could still spread COVID-19 even if they did not exhibit symptoms, and it was important to track both categories. The wording in the testing guidelines was eventually tweaked to say you do not necessarily need a test unless you are a vulnerable individual or your healthcare provider or state or local public health officials recommend you take one. This document resulted in less aggressive testing of those without symptoms that I believed were the primary reason for the early community spread, Birx said, adding that the change in the guidance was not based on science. Womp womp. So here we are, dealing with the worst outbreak in the world, certainly in terms of numbers. I guess in percentages and per capita, we're no longer in the top echelon there. Eastern Europe's outbreak having long since outpaced us there, but we're still doing pretty poorly. And I think everybody knows that, and everybody knows why. And it was always pretty obvious, but now we have written evidence, and written evidence of them trying to get rid of other written evidence. So that's pretty fun. I guess, whatever. I don't know what to make of that, other than history will demand to know why we didn't hang Trump. It's just true. All right, let's see. Other things to discuss. Maybe now would be a time to jump into the story just by way of background so that it's out there in detail if Joan would like to discuss it at all. In the wake of the Bannon indictment, Republicans are now warning of payback. GOP lawmakers say Democrats, by pursuing contempt charges against the Trump ally, are paving the way for them to go after Biden aides if they retake the House in 2022. Of course, the whole premise of the story is stupid. I mean, well, for one thing, who cares what they say? And for another, of course they're going to go after Biden and Biden aides if they retake the House in 2022. It wouldn't matter one way or the other whether they indicted Bannon or not. If they had given him the Congressional Medal of Honor, which he wouldn't be eligible for. But if they had just gone ahead and done it, or if they give him a congressional gold medal, which he, technically would be eligible for if they wanted to give it to him, they would still be investigating Biden and Biden aides. They don't need our permission, or we're not paving the way for doing it. And of course, the other weird premise in all of this is I am reminded of the efforts to impeach George W. Bush, who deserved it on his own merit, of course. And the Republican mantra then, and repeated by many in the press, was that any impeachment of George W. Bush would merely have been tit for tat retaliation for the Clinton impeachment, about which really there was no bearing whatsoever, no interaction between the two. But that was a narrative that they were successful in selling to the media. So, you now have to ask, do you remember when retaliation and payback was inherently a bad thing, even when it wasn't really happening? It was bad enough that you would run a story tarring an impeachment effort with allegations that it was political payback, and that would invalidate it on its face. For whatever reason, when Republicans openly say, yes, we're doing this for payback, that doesn't invalidate it on its face anymore. It's just baked into the way the press handles the Republicans at this point. And one of our, myriad problems. Anyway, this story reported by Amy B. Wang. She wants you to have her middle initial, so I'll give it to you. Republicans are rallying around former White House advisor Stephen G.B. Bannon after his indictment on charges of contempt of Congress on Friday, warning that Democrats' efforts to force Bannon to comply with what they say is an unfair subpoena paves the way for them to do the same if they take back the House in 2022. If they take back the House, they can do all the unfair subpoenas they want, with or without the Bannon thing. Bannon, like former President Donald Trump, has refused to comply with an order from the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection to turn over records and testify about his actions leading up to the attack when a pro-Trump mob stormed the U.S. Capitol trying to stop the certification of President Biden's Electoral College win. And just election win, generally. Why couch it that way? I see what that's technically true, but just say he won the election. Bannon is expected to turn himself into law enforcement on Monday. That's an interesting way of saying it. He did do that, by the way, but that doesn't mean, of course, it makes it sound like he's going to do a magic trick. Abracadabra, I'm law enforcement. No, he's surrendering. Why not say that? Bannon is expected to surrender to law enforcement on Monday. Ahead of a court appearance that afternoon, Democrats and a handful of anti-Trump Republicans argued that the indictment was necessary to enforce subpoenas issued by the January 6th committee to Trump associates who are resisting cooperation and to witnesses summoned by other congressional panels. Many GOP leaders, however, are seizing on Bannon's indictment to contend that Democrats are weaponizing the Justice Department, warning Democrats that they will go after Biden's aides for unspecified reasons if they take back the House majority in next year's midterm elections, as most political analysts expect. Of course, they would do so from the standpoint of doing it from the opposition. They would be sending Republican ordered subpoenas. And, of course, the other thing is most frequently, Democratic administration aides answer their subpoenas. Not always, but usually. The answers they may give in testimony might be considered unsatisfactory in order to get to this retaliation that they want. And they'll be able to do it. They'll be able to trump up the charges, right? So you'll call a Biden administration aide in front of whatever committee Jim Jordan is on. Or if you call him in front of a committee that Jim Jordan's not on it, Republicans will assign Jim Jordan to it. And he'll ask questions like, isn't it true that you're guilty of treason? And let me also add 4 minutes and 59 seconds of other things so that you can answer. And I speechify about how you're guilty of treason. Maybe I'll actually give you an opportunity to answer. And you'll say, I don't know what you're talking about. My job was, for the administration, was to go out and buy Girl Scout cookies to give out at a White House function, so I'm not certain what you're talking. Don't give me that. You're guilty of treason, and everybody knows it. And I move that we hold this witness in contempt. They're not admitting their treason, and they'll say not really a thing that we would ordinarily do or that we would ordinarily say is the basis for contempt. But what the hell? Let's do it anyway. And they'll hold somebody in contempt for showing up, answering questions honestly, but angering Jim Jordan. And you can do that. Of course, then you refer the case to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice says that we're not going to prosecute. Now, if they wanted to go the inherent contempt route, I suppose they could do that. But, that's an escalation, and you'd think that normal people would want to have really good justification for doing that. I guess it's out there, and the press might find it exciting to watch, so they might very well do that. So don't buy the Girl Scout cookies if you're asked to, I guess. That's not going to save you. Go ahead. Fulfill your mission. They're going to haul you in anyway. Let's see. So where were we? For years, Democrats basically accused President Trump of weaponizing the DOJ. In reality, it is the left that has been weaponizing the DOJ the entire time. From the false Russia hoax to the Soviet-style prosecution of political opponents, says Representative Elise Stefanik, the third-ranking House Republican, replacing Cheney as GOP conference chair, right? Representative Jim Jordan, he'd be in there, suggested that Republicans would seek payback if the GOP regained control of the House, signaling that in challenging the doctrine of executive privilege, Democrats were making it easier for Republicans to force Biden's top advisors to testify before future GOP Congresses. Not really. Joe Biden has eviscerated executive privilege. Not really. Jordan wrote on Twitter, there are a lot of Republicans eager to hear testimony from Ron Klain and Jake Sullivan when we take back the House. And again, he may or may not really understand what he's doing, but he has to pretend that he doesn't, I guess, in order to make the point. I mean, there are a lot of Republicans eager to hear testimony from Ron Klain and Jake Sullivan, and they'll probably come and give you testimony. And then you'll be like, well, it's contempt anyway. And that'll be what you do. But, don't try to draw a parody here. There's been no subpoena to them, and they haven't refused anything. And when they get subpoenas, maybe they won't refuse it. So, but you'll say, give us written proof of treason. There isn't any. Oh, contempt. You refuse to give us the documentation. It's probably how it'll go. Anyway, or they will purposely ask questions like, tell me what you told him about national security stuff right now. Blurt it out into the camera. I can't do that. Contempt. It'll be something like that. The January 6th committee, of course, may also refer Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to the Justice Department for criminal prosecution, possibly, in the coming days. Meadows, like Bannon, has also been subpoenaed by the committee and did not appear Friday for a scheduled deposition. Roadblocks to that, much more obviously an executive branch employee than Bannon. So some perhaps better claim to the executive privilege shield. But we'll see. Democrats argue that the doctrine of executive privilege, intended to shield confidential communication between president and his advisors, was never meant to apply to the kind of information the committee is now seeking. The panel is, of course, exploring conversations between Bannon and Trump that occurred when Bannon held no government position. And committee members say they are interested in interactions related to an insurrectionary attack on the U.S. Capitol, not in talks involving legitimate government business. More broadly, they say that far from being political, the January 6th committee is investigating an effort to overturn a legitimate election, including an attack on Congress that resulted in 5 deaths and injuries to some 140 law enforcement officers. 9 Republicans joined all House Democrats in voting to hold Bannon in contempt last month. But many Republicans are dismissing such distinctions, and Representative Lauren Boebert issued an especially direct payback threat. This also, by the way, all the direct payback threats, quiet part out loud, as usual. What's her threat? Now that Democrats have started these politically motivated indictments for contempt of Congress, I look forward to seeing their reactions when we keep that same energy, whatever that's supposed to mean, as we take back the House next year. Boebert declared on Twitter Saturday. Their reactions will be, you people are abusing your power. I mean, that's what you say we're doing. Presumably that's what we'll say you're doing, except, they'll be different in kind, but everyone will just say both sides. Stefanik, to bolster the contention that Bannon's indictment is politically motivated, pointed out that when congressional Republicans voted to hold Attorney General Eric Holder in 2012 and former IRS official Lois Lerner in 2014 in contempt, the Justice Department under President Barack Obama did not pursue criminal charges against them. That's true. They didn't, and I think everybody understands why, but, why not conflate the two? Even as other people pointed out, by the way, all day on Twitter, they both testified and provided tons of documentation as demanded, but this is how we know what they're going to do with the next round of contempt. They did this last time. They said, well, give us evidence of your treason. I'm sorry, there isn't any evidence of my treason. I haven't committed any treason. Contempt. Well, they couldn't get a prosecution for that, and they won't get it next time either. All right. Well, anyway, time to wrap this up in terms of jumping into our commercial. Anyway, our fake commercial coming up next. And our next segment, of course, Joan McCarter will join us. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. It's welcome back to Kagro in the Morning week. Is what we'll call it. Yeah, just in an attempt to avoid calling it Infrastructure Week. That bill's done. It's been signed now. This could also be Infrastructure Week because they had a big party and everything.
They had a big party out in the cold.
Yeah, right. So
everybody complained about how cold it was.
Well, yeah. Well, you got to do things outdoors for health purposes. It's good brisk weather and wear a coat. And it's probably not cold. There's probably a huge section of the country, representatives from a large portion of the country that said, this isn't cold at all. It's relatively balmy compared to what I have at home usually. But okay, bill's signed and things move on now. So what in the world, what are you going to do with the rest of your life now that the infrastructure bill has been passed?
It's not done.
Oh, okay.
It's not done.
What? No? All right.
As Vice President Kamala Harris reminded everybody yesterday, and I appreciated hugely that she did.
Yes, right. There's more to do.
Because the human infrastructure part still has to be done.
Yes. That too
and
is
that's,
infrastructure.
of course, going to be the continuing fight. But to celebrate, and they do get to celebrate, I mean, this is kind of a big deal.
Okay. Yes.
Biden is starting today in New Hampshire, where we have Maggie Hassan, who is running for re-election next year and, can use a presidential visit announcing that this 82-year-old bridge that is about ready to fall down is going to be refurbished.
Ah, okay.
That's what he's doing today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. I knew he was making a trip there and they said something about a bridge and they have old bridges. I know that. Not one of those covered bridges, is it?
Not one of those covered bridges. It's a steel bridge that's 82 years old and has been on the state's red list, which is the danger list, I guess, for 7 years, I think.
Okay. 82 years old. So eligible to run for Senate in the area, I guess, at this point.
But not in Vermont.
Okay, right. So then, all right. It might be one of the bridges across the rivers that separate them. I don't know. So,
and in case you missed it, Senator Patrick Leahy is retiring at age 81.
Yes, right. It's been a long time.
Unlike 89-year-old Chuck Grassley.
Yeah. How many terms has Chuck Grassley had? I mean, he's old, but he hasn't been there as long, I guess. But
I don't think he's been in as... Leahy was one of the Watergate class.
Yeah.
So he's 1974.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll find out about that. I'll look that up. But I guess that means if...
So, yeah, he was elected in 1980.
Okay. So
one
term
fewer.
less. Okay. Well, all right. Anyway, yeah, Leahy, I expected as much. You'd really, you'd be looking at the distinct possibility of maybe not finishing the term or maybe not feeling well enough to finish the term. Might as well retire while you have your health, and can't blame them for that. And Vermont. It worried me a little bit because it did occur to me, and someone said it. I said, oh yeah, I guess that's true. He's the only Democrat ever to represent Vermont in the Senate. Like, we think of them as reliably Democratic.
Wow.
I think that's what somebody said. And, they were he's been there so long that it was like, he came in when it was tradition for really old line New England Republicans, liberal Republicans, to have represented them. And of course, Bernie Sanders, independent, so kind of doesn't count, but I think that may be true.
Does.
Yeah.
I mean, it does.
Yeah. I mean, that's the sort of statement that makes you worry. Like, oh my God, could they have a Republican? Well, they could. I mean, it's not impossible.
Not a Republican governor.
Yeah, right. I mean, it happens from time to time. Vermont does that all the time with their governors.
Who is not going to be running for the Senate seat.
Yeah, okay. That's good news. Yeah, in other states, that's a frequent threat. But for whatever reason, I guess the Vermont governors, though they're elected statewide, I guess maybe they have like a 2-year term, I think, for governor there. And they just turn out not to be powerhouses, It's not a juggernaut like it is in other states for some weird reason. It's good. Hang on to that, Vermont. It's a nice trait, especially if you have Republican governors. Okay. It's a weird place, I must say. All right, so we'll...
The other retirement news this morning was kind of a surprise.
Oh?
Jackie Spear in the House in California.
Okay. Yeah,
I
put her
can't
on the
blame
list.
anybody for wanting to get the hell out of there. It's the last place I would want to have to work.
Sure, right. And
but you hate to see good ones going.
Yeah. I mean, with the danger that Republicans put Democratic colleagues in all the time, and the reality of, everyone seems to forget in the wake of that weird guy saying, when can we use the guns kind of thing, like forgetting you've been using the guns all along, and don't forget you used them to shoot a Democratic member of Congress not that long ago. I mean, you got to figure that...
I can imagine that it's rather triggering for her to have to show up there every day with people.
Right. I've been shot already. I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I can't blame her I can't blame anybody for wanting to be out of there. It's too bad. But especially when you figure that that's the Republican plan, is scare enough of them into retirement that they're open seats and see what we can grab. Okay. It's really kind of disgusting. But all right, well, that is a surprise. Yeah, well, that's certainly the plan on the local level. Even scare all the school board members into retiring, scare elections officials into retiring. For a while, scare CDC officials into retiring.
And it's working in terms of public health stuff.
Yes.
I saw a story in Kaiser Health News about how many state and local public health officials have left their jobs.
Yeah.
Largely
across
from
the
the
board.
threat of violence. Which means, the pandemic's not going away anytime soon, and there are going to be more of them coming, because, of course there are, because we're destroying the environment and it's breeding them. So we're going to be really, really even more unprepared come the next one, because all of these professionals have said, I can't do this anymore, which I completely understand.
Yes, they're entitled to.
I don't fault them at all for deciding that their and their family's safety is more important.
Yeah, you can't blame them. But I'm just thinking ahead to the next possible pandemic, even if we have, I don't know, a 10-year, 20-year break in between this one and the next one, the next thing that comes out that's an airborne illness, and the first health official who realizes I'm going to have to tell people to put masks on. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Do I do it? Do I quit? Do I tell people, don't mask? I don't know. Otherwise, mobs will kill me. I guess you could do that. I don't know. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you that if you do what you should do, mobs will come and attack me. Does everybody understand what that means? You should be putting on a, right, okay. Yeah, it's also amazing that, Republicans continue to deny that this is a problem. And when the Attorney General shows up saying, yeah, we probably should look into it at a federal level, when elections officials, school officials, health officials, all things that we supposedly value in this country, health, education, and our freedom to hold democratic elections, are under such intense threat that the people who are knowledgeable about how to work the levers and are willing to do it are instead no longer willing to do it. They're running away because you people keep threatening to murder them, and you want me to stop looking at it. And also, by the way, you're also telling everybody should murder me for saying that we should look at how you guys all want to murder people. I mean, you keep improving the point. It's like,
yeah.
Not unlike you do with CRT, right? We want to make sure that nobody gets taught anything about history, just to prove that we don't care about history and are not sorry about what we did before. Okay.
And hate cancel culture.
Yeah, right. So, all that.
Kind of like how they're so pro-life. It's astounding to me. Just astounding and depressing.
Yes. Well,
I mean, I don't know if it's because I live in ground zero for all of this craziness, or whether things are really as grim as they seem out there. But
yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, yeah,
Idaho is now embroiled in 3 separate lawsuits challenging the Biden administration's policies, vaccination policies.
Oh, how many can you get? I mean, one.
I don't know. I didn't know there were 3, but we're in all of them.
Right. I guess so. I'm suing first about the first shot. I'm also suing you about the second one and the booster. Maybe that's it. But separately and all these things. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of weirdness going on. We were just talking earlier about Oklahoma replacing the commandant. I don't know, what do they call the adjutant general in charge of the Army National Guard. I guess commandant would be maybe Marines. They use that. But Governor Stitt there replacing the head of the National Guard so that he could get a guy who would rescind the vaccine order or attempt to rescind the vaccine order for the Guard. And now everybody having to scramble to figure out, hey, when it comes to vaccinating our troops for readiness purposes, is that the governor getting to claim that he's commander-in-chief of the National Guard as long as they're on state duty? Or can the president say, you're the National Guard, at the Oklahoma Guard, you're the National Guard, take the vaccine? So, more weirdness. No lawsuit yet, but I assume that comes soon. And I imagine the next time your governor leaves the state, your lieutenant governor will fire the commander of the National Guard there and do
Undoubtedly.
that.
Undoubtedly. Which is why, of course, we have joined these 3 suits, because there's this crazy woman with her Glock and her Bible.
That's all you need.
Every time he steps foot out of the state, does something even more ridiculous. So between her and Ammon Bundy,
he should just
who is also running for governor.
Why wait?
Kind of interesting.
Yeah. Oh, is he? I know he's a whacker. Obviously,
he got Ron Paul's endorsement.
Oh, okay. Well, that works too. How old is Ron Paul? Ron Paul, right? Not Rand. Rand didn't endorse him, did he? I mean, he might.
No.
Okay.
Very old, I think.
I'll have to look that up. I'm curious about that. How's he alive? That's not fair. Anyway.
How are any of them alive?
Really?
They're
seriously.
COVID deniers. How?
Yeah, well,
I suspect
some of them
that they are all secretly vaccinated.
That
Except
could be
maybe
true.
Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is probably not.
Maybe.
And she now owes $60,000 in fines.
Yeah, how do
Well,
we
she
get
doesn't
that?
owe it because they're taking it out of her paycheck.
Good. All right.
She has violated the mask mandate in the House so many times that she's racked up $60,000 in fines. Who is subsidizing her? I want to know.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, she had a business, maybe she's just living off of that. And she had the gym. I don't think she was making any money with the gym, but she had a construction business that they bought from her dad one day. I don't know. That was her main income, and I guess that, unfortunately, is still enough. But also, she can just order her staff around.
Infrastructure money.
Yeah. Well, so what is she doing when she's not violating the mask mandate? She's not on any committees, obviously. I'm wondering, though, is there anything we need to catch up on here? I warned everybody there was a possibility that you might have to remind everybody the government could shut down again and we'd hit the debt ceiling. We always remind everybody of that.
We
That's
have,
nothing new,
we've got the zombie FTC commissioner. We didn't talk about that.
Right. Okay. We can do it.
The FTC is another commission like the FCC that is in danger of coming under Republican control if the Senate doesn't act on nominations by the end of the year.
Oh, okay. So that's
and right now, the FTC actually is operating with, this is the craziest story. Did you read it? The zombie thing?
I did, yeah. But
the commissioner who is still voting on things, even though he's now not on the FTC, he's not still a commissioner because he's over running the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Oh.
But the rules of the commission apparently allow for emailed votes, pre-votes. So
pre-votes.
Pre-votes. So they had all of these things that they were going to do lined up ahead of time. And he sent an email saying, this is how I'm voting on all of these things, essentially.
Okay.
So that the Democrats could maintain a majority on the FTC.
All right. There'll be some questions about that. I mean, I imagine lawsuits.
Any actions that they decide to take. And they haven't done any real ones, any that have true impact yet, but they're going to have to. Any that they take can really be challenged, and I would think probably pretty effectively because he's not on the commission and he's voting.
Yeah, I mean, that is really bizarre. Pre-votes, like, okay, you've just been impeached. Like, well, okay, but when or expelled from Congress, when you vote on, drilling in the Arctic Wildlife Reserve, I want to cast that now. I'm not out yet. What? You never allow that. I mean, I guess anything you have to do in a crisis to try to keep things moving is, partisans will do what they do, including Democrats, but that seems dangerous in terms of the longevity of the policies.
It seems rather dangerous, particularly when, there is this, remember back in July, the big sweeping sort of consumer protection executive orders and anti-monopoly executive order that Biden put out.
Okay, yes.
He had a lot of jobs for the FTC lined up in that. And as well as the FCC, which he has finally made those two nominations, but they haven't been confirmed yet.
Okay.
That one also will revert to Republicans, the Federal Communications Commission, which, net neutrality and everything else. It reverts to Republicans if they don't have commissioners renominated, reconfirmed by the end of the year. So there's that.
Right,
there's of course the debt ceiling, which we think is going to be December 3rd-ish. It's another one of those. Well, Treasury can do this, they can do that. They don't ever have an exact deadline for when the debt ceiling has to be raised. But
that is close on Thanksgiving.
Sure, let's say December 3rd because everything else is December 3rd. Government funding. Schumer sent out this big letter to all of his colleagues on Sunday saying, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. They're not going to do all of that. And I think probably the thing that's going to be pushed off.
Oh, that didn't sound really good.
I mean, they're not going to do it all. They're not going to do voting rights.
No, I can't imagine that they, are going to get very much done. Thanksgiving looms already, although I did
they're out all of next week because of Thanksgiving. Although, maybe.
That's...
Actually, Pelosi did.
I saw that.
I saw something. Pelosi did threaten Thanksgiving this morning, I think.
Yes, I didn't see much substance behind it, but I did see a tweet. Kyle Griffin, quoting NBC News, saying Pelosi told members of the House Dem leadership, that they will not leave Washington for Thanksgiving without passing the Build Back Better Act, which I could imagine is a possibility. For the House to handle that one thing, okay. Hopefully that means
I think the House can do it, probably. Yeah. The House is further ahead on a lot of its work.
Sure.
There's still, government funding. One thing Schumer did say was, we're not going to fund the government. We're going to have another continuing resolution, which is what Republicans have been pushing all along.
Yeah, that too. I saw somebody mention that, I guess I was puzzled by it. The Democrats saying that they might push for a shorter CR than was currently on the table. And I didn't read into it yet, and I don't know who would do that or why, and it's very rarely the case. Usually Republicans, trying to make trouble, say we want a shorter CR. I can't guess yet why Democrats would want a shorter one.
Well, I'm thinking Schumer thinks he jams Republicans by doing these things, like by not putting debt ceiling into budget reconciliation.
Okay.
I think he's thinking he can play chicken with McConnell. It worked the first time on debt ceiling, so
I guess.
Maybe.
Yeah. It seems to leave, say, less time for making sure you have commissioners for the various panels you were just talking about. Like, if you could push these things out a little further and say debt ceiling and government operations to end of January or into February, then you could fill these commissions. But, okay. I don't know. He's got a plan, even though then he also had a plan to say all the things that he was going to do, and you immediately knew he wasn't going to do them.
Right.
Ugh. All right.
And there's another one. Ron Bloom at the Postal Service, the chair of the Board of Governors, his term's up on December 8th.
Oh.
And, that one is not necessarily as critical in terms of timing, except that we get rid of Ron Bloom at the head of the Postal Service board and get somebody who will finally fire Louis DeJoy.
Okay, so, all right. Will it happen? They had the ability to remove him earlier and replace him with somebody who would be interested in firing DeJoy, but they opted not to do that, right? And then, so now it's the natural.
Biden.
Yes. They that guy. Right. And so now, though, the term comes to a natural expiration, and I suppose if he's got any plans in nominating someone who will fire DeJoy, he just says, he didn't jump the gun in any way to do it.
No.
Okay, so he should be comfortable. And then we'll see what happens. And then we'll know something.
I've been kind of discouraged. He's been doing great getting judges nominated. Mm-hmm. And he's doing what he said he would do. He's looking for a very diverse group. People who not only diverse professionally, but diverse, of course, racially and in terms of gender. Everybody is getting nominated, including public defenders and non-corporate lawyers, which is really important.
It is.
And they've been chugging through on those confirmations really well, but I fear it's at the expense of the executive nominations.
I guess it could
which
be.
Which he seems to just be kind of willing to go like with the FDA. He nominated the guy who Obama had in, who several Democratic lawmakers really oppose. because he did very little on the opioid crisis, and for some of these senators, like Manchin, like Hassan, the opioid crisis is a big deal, and this guy really didn't do a whole lot to help. He's also really in tight with pharma. So the FDA commissioner he's nominated, and that it took this long to nominate an FDA commissioner in a pandemic is a problem. But that he also picked one that seemed to be just sort of the default guy hanging around because he didn't want to put a lot of effort into finding somebody. That's what it feels like. It's what it feels like on all of these executive nominations that have been delayed, that they haven't really put a lot of time and effort into it, and they're just sort of going with the default choices. In the case of the FCC, that's good. He's picked good people.
Okay.
But, with the Postal Service, we don't know what that's going to mean yet. I don't want it to be Bloom, but I think probably the easiest course for him is going to be Bloom, which means there goes the Postal Service eventually.
Yep.
And with the FTC and FDA is just sort of, housekeeping that they're not really paying attention to, but need to be because they have big plans for these things.
I mean, that's true, and there's still plenty happening and lots on their plate.
Are you there?
Yeah. Oh, am I not? Did I hit a button? All right, let's see. All right. Can you hear me or no? I must have hit something that didn't mean to. I wonder what that was. Oh dear. Okay.
Hello.
Dang. Wonder what's going on here. All right, let's see. We'll recall and see what's going on here. All right, well, try again. Let's see. I'll call her and see if it works this way. Hey, Joan, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I don't know. I must have accidentally lost, or maybe just one of those glitches that goes on. But we heard you just fine, including hello. I can't hear you. But so okay, a little bit of a glitch there, but tried figuring it out. But why do that when we can just let it go?
Call me again.
Yeah. But okay, let's see. Anything
But
else
anyway,
we want to
I was
fit in?
mid-rant.
We heard
they're not listening to me, so.
We just didn't get a chance to tell you how interesting it was to hear you, but we did hear you. So there is that. So okay, so plenty of things that require attention, but and there's lots going on, and you can always say, well, geez, we're doing these huge things. President could be a little distracted, but then there's hundreds of people who are on the job to make sure that this stuff still happens regardless. So
right, and it does come from the top. I mean, I'm going to pick on Biden a little bit here because he does set the priorities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and his big priority was making sure that he got a bipartisan infrastructure bill, which I don't know when that became a priority. It hadn't been at the beginning, but it feels like so much effort and attention and his time has been spent on that the rest has sort of been put on autopilot. And I think that's a bit of a problem. I mean, I know how much he's had to deal with, how much he's had to try to clean up. But the cleaning up includes getting his people into all of these critical government positions.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones doing the cleanup at the lower levels.
Yeah, right. They'll relieve you of some of the burden. I mean, the president doesn't have his eyes on all of these things, and some of these hundreds of people also, supposed to have that on their plate. And all of it also has to go through the Senate, and the Senate is just a graveyard at this point. And even though you don't have to deal with filibusters in the same sense, in the same way, it's a lot easier to get to the votes on executive nominations. It's still a pain in the ass. It still doesn't work right.
Yes, and it's slow.
Yeah.
And it's a slog, and it should have been being worked on months ago.
That's for sure. Okay. Well, we'll see what they're able to do and whether maybe the House's rush towards passing Build Back Better does anything to motivate the Senate, at least the senators.
It might help. I think they're going to get a CBO score this week, as they said. So, yeah, I could see them slipping into next week to do the vote. And hopefully they're doing as much as they possibly can to answer all of the Senate's concerns. So,
yeah. I mean, we still
so
have
maybe it'll get through the Senate. So far, Joe Manchin is not saying if he's going to let it. So.
Yeah. Right. Well, we still have that problem, but the pressure ratchets up as the rest of the senators come into line, and he's once again the only holdout. He's not worried about being the only holdout, but maybe he's waiting for that. He demands being the only holdout. He might change his mind later, but that might be the way we have to progress.
I think that's the theory that they're operating on, is to try to jam him a little bit.
Okay.
I hope it works.
I hope so, and maybe that's this, like I said, maybe it's this hostage demand. I need to have that moment where I'm in control, whether I get anything out of it or not, even if it's a small thing. So maybe we have to go through this one more time regardless. We will see, and let's see. Oh, well, next Tuesday will be looming Thanksgiving by that point, too. I don't know what your schedule is like, but I hope we can have you back again.
I'll be here.
Excellent. That's good news. And then, then we'll have our Thanksgiving, and then come back from that. So, okay, thanks for joining us today.
All the time.
Yeah, right. All the Tuesdays are still happening, and we appreciate it. Thanks very much, John. We'll talk to you on the next one.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Oh, well, that was a little rough. We don't have enough time with her usually as it is, and then we get interrupted in the middle. But I'll tell you what, not only will she be back next Tuesday, but you'll get more news and events from around the world and around the country, of course, with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Justice Putnam to fill you in on anything we might have missed and more.